I hope you're doing well, and I know you are because it's all we've been doing is texting back and forth and talking all about Apple Music. So I told you
He's got an
before the show
Apple hat. Oh
started.
my God.
So a little bit of background is when I was in college, I was an Apple student rep, and I supported three colleges over my, I don't know, I think it was like over a 4 or 5 year period. So I've got some vintage Apple paraphernalia that I brought out for the show,
Nice.
including my Apple mug, which you can see here.
Very
So
cool.
a bit of trivia. Everybody's probably been to an Apple store, but what people probably don't know is there's an Apple store at Apple headquarters at One Infinite Loop. And even though it's an Apple store, they just call it the company store. And half the store, which last time I went was many years ago, you could actually buy Mac products, but the other half had all Apple branded stuff that you can't get anyplace else. So I brought my Apple mug straight from One Infinite Loop to the show this evening.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. So this probably started maybe a month ago when Apple first announced they were going lossless and spatial audio. I said, Teo, we got to start taking some notes. Let's both get a subscription to Apple Music and let's listen on our systems. I've got two Atmos systems hooked up already. I think you have one or two. At least you have two, right?
Got
Yeah, you
two.
have two.
Yeah.
So I wanted to compare what our findings were because I did find some anomalies with playing it. I wanted to make sure it wasn't just limited to my gear. So I had
Mhm.
you replicate some of my findings, and we actually reported it to Apple Music because we do have a press contact there. So the bottom line is it's an exciting time to be streaming music right now between Tidal, Qobuz, Apple. I mean, right now the only way you can get Atmos over streaming is through Tidal or through Apple Music, to my knowledge. I don't know of any other streaming service right now that is streaming Atmos music.
I'm not aware of one either off the top of my head. You have been able to do Qobuz multi-channel for some time, but there have been quite a few anomalies and different things that you've had to jump through hoops if you wanted to do it, especially to play through Rune, because I'm a big Rune fan. I was on the Rune 1.8 beta side, and as you know, we're going to be doing a review on that. But that aside, this is really just an exciting time. I think, Apple, if you look at Apple historically, Apple has really been a leader in media creation, in the audio field, especially. And I think the fact that Apple has made this decision to really put a marker down as far as lossless audio goes and as far as Apple spatial audio goes is something that really talks about what the future of music is, and
Mm-hmm.
it's incredibly exciting. I don't know about you, but ever since I started really getting into the music hobby, uh, to me, when I was introduced to multi-channel, I don't know how long ago, how many decades ago at this point, there was always this notion that we wanted more out of the audio system to be able to replicate what we experience in real life. And while two channels or stereo is so great, especially on an amazing high performance audio system, it still can't truly replicate what we experience in a club, in a concert hall. And that promise has been there with multi-channel, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
been 5.1, 7.1, and now immersive audio. And it just allows the artist's creativity, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in the show, to come to the forefront. But to me, it just replicates the experience of a real concert, a real club, and it's amazing. It really is.
Yeah. Well, one interesting thing you put together the slide presentation. So we'll define what Apple lossless is. We'll define what spatial audio is. We'll define, all the different things about these two formats. One thing that is interesting to me is I've spoken to many recording artists in the past, and they've always been of the mindset that people aren't going to go beyond 5.1, at least in Europe, and most likely in domestically. It's a challenge for people to go beyond 5.1. In fact, one particular artist, Steven Wilson, who I am really fond of his music and the stuff he did with Porcupine Tree, he didn't even know what Dolby Atmos was a few years ago when I interviewed him. And now his latest album, Future Bites, is in Dolby Atmos, streaming on Tidal, streaming on Apple Music. It's just so funny how it's turned full circle in a matter of a couple of years, that even guys that are making kind of obscure progressive rock music that are moving a little bit towards more of the pop era are now embracing immersive audio. So you're getting multi-channel immersive audio mixes from artists I never thought you would see that ever happening with, and it's happening quickly.
I agree. And I truly firmly believe that this is so much geared towards education. Once you experience an Atmos setup, any immersive audio setup, you just can't go back to either a 2-channel, a smart speaker, or anything else. The experience is so riveting. The way that I would try to even explain it to somebody is, imagine you've been in an old movie theater from the 1960s, and then you automatically jump into an IMAX theater. The revelation that you get with an immersive audio setup is that stark, that amazing. When I was doing some of the listening on Apple Music, I was sitting down here one evening, and my wife Cleo was down here, and she says, Taylor Swift's voice was coming out of the back speakers, and this and that. And, I wouldn't call my wife an audiophile by any means, but there was a totally different sense of excitement. And she's like, can we listen to that again? And can we experience that again? And I think that's really the promise of what it is. Music is an art form. Music is something that draws all of us as we'll call ourselves audioholics, but I think we're just passionate about the art form. And that art form is music, it's movies, it's something about how this excites our senses and how artists' meaning and music can move us. And to be able to bring that home in a new and exciting way is just, it's literally a dream come true. Parentheses for a sec.
Yeah.
You and I both have read and been fans of Stereophile. And for many, many years, I'm sure many of our listeners here as well. And, Cal Rubinson has had this column for forever called Music in the Round, and has been such an advocate for multi-channel music, the potential that multi-channel music can have. And, I'm kind of excited to talk to him in a bit to see what his perspective is over the years, because he's been just really, I think, carrying the torch for all of us. And to see the promise come at this juncture, especially with a big name like Apple moving the needle, is just really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, before all of the streaming stuff happened, the only way you could really experience Atmos music is if you went out and you bought some Blu-rays that had it, which were very rare. Like I have Roger Waters' The Wall on Blu-ray, which is video and Atmos. But most of my multi-channel music is 5.1 DTS HD over Blu-ray, and then I upmix it with the DSU or with the Oro upmixer. So up until literally 2 or 3 months ago, our Atmos music library was really scarce. And now, and to preface that, there's the selection's growing every day. The diversity is growing. Not all the mixes are great. We'll admit that right up front. It's just like, if you listen to the older Beatles records, when they went from mono to stereo, they were so gimmicky in the fact that they had one voice coming out of one speaker and another voice coming out of another. There was no, crosstalk between them. It was just an unnatural stereo reproduction. We saw the same thing happen when DTS came out with DTS CDs, and they were shoving, vocals super loud behind you, or they were goosing up the bass. But over time, the mixes got more tasteful. Then we got DVD audio, we got SACD, and we were getting incredibly good 5.1 mixes. So I think the same thing is going to happen with Atmos music. I think right now, many of the artists, especially pop artists, are going to kind of really drive the effect so people can hear it. And the purists are going to fight back and say this is unrealistic. But I think eventually we're going to find a happy medium, and people are going to be embracing this, especially now with COVID, where people aren't going to movie theaters as much now. They're building home theaters in their house. They're building music systems more now than they've had in the past. In fact, so much more now. You can't even buy electronics, but that's a whole topic for another video. So I don't want to dwell on this. I want to get into your presentation that you did here. We'll go over everything you have, and then we'll maybe answer some questions. I'm going to share the screen, and then I'm going to let you take over.
Great. When I share my screen, mine will go blank, so you'll have to tell me if you can see the presentation okay.
Okay. You still see us on camera too. I don't have it full screen. So if you want to, I'm like Anthony Gramani. I talk with my hands. That's what Italians do.
That's fabulous. Oh, by the way, I said to myself, I'm going to lead with this, and I totally forgot. Anthony said something at the end of one of the recent shows. I don't remember who is. And by the way, Anthony has just been such a fabulous addition. Yep. And the one thing that Anthony said that I wanted to do at the beginning of the show is he really remarked how passionate you are. And we've known each other now for a long time. And I think it just is worth reiterating. We were chatting midnight last night. Mm-hmm. It is not an unusual thing for you to email 2, 3 in the morning. And the one thing that I've so appreciated about you, and I think our friendship over the years, is I've developed such an incredible respect for you as a person and how you view the importance of this hobby, and how you've really not just made this sort of your life, but it's really become a passion that has impacted so many people, me personally, and just really tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of other people. So I think we just all deserve a big thank you to you, to say that, Gene, because not everybody sees behind the curtain, so to speak, like the select few of us do, with how passionate you are and how hard you work on behalf of all of us. So just a thanks.
Wow. I really appreciate that, Teo. And tribute to you and all the writers for Audioholics. I have such a great talent that complements this website. And I feel like we're producing the best content we've ever done, both on YouTube, on the editorial site. And we've got a lot of surprises coming, especially with the trade shows coming up. We're going to be really giving people virtual coverage that's never been done at a trade show before. So I'm excited. The smart home is kicking ass. We're doing some cool stuff there. You're going to be seeing more of that soon. And Teo, I got to get you down to Florida again so you can hear my new system. I think you'll be quite impressed.
I can't wait. I really can't wait. So that's going to happen sometime soon. All right. So let's jump into it.
Awesome.
So what we're talking about tonight is we're talking about an announcement that Apple made in May 17th specifically. And when it came across the trade news, everybody may not have picked up on a couple of nuances. And what Apple did is actually Apple had 2 separate announcements in one. Number one is Apple announced that they were deploying high-res lossless audio to a significant portion of the audio catalog, as well as immersive audio powered by Dolby Atmos. So those are 2 very different things that were announced on May 17th.
Before you go forward, just for the layman that's just getting onto the channel, what does it mean by lossless? What does that mean?
So what lossless means, and I will go into that a little bit more detail, is imagine now there's a recording in a studio, and that recording now needs to be streamed or downloaded to your device. What will typically happen back from the Napster days and the early advent of a lot of our online music stores is these music files were compressed to make them small. And there's 2 ways to compress a file. There's a lossy way, and if you hear the word loss, you'd be very smart. And what happens is there's data that's thrown away. And a lossy codec, what it does is it uses psychoacoustics to basically say, oh, okay, the individual probably won't notice that big of a difference if we throw out all the high frequencies over 16 kilohertz, or if we compress and sort of throw out some of this data. So a lossy codec impacts the audio. It impacts the sound of the music, because when you uncompress that file and you play it on any device, there's actually data missing. So that's an important nuance about a lossy codec. Lossless codecs, what they do is they take the original file, they compress it down. But then when it's uncompressed and you play it, it has all the original data of the original file.
So it's
So
bit for bit perfect,
it's
basically.
bit perfect. That's a term that you'll hear, is bit perfect. Now, the drawback of that is, or the compromise, lossless files take significantly more space on a hard drive or on a mobile device than a lossy codec compressed file would. So while a lossless codec is going to make your music sound better, it's actually, from a purist point of view, how you want to archive your music. It's something you just need to have a consideration in terms of space. But that's the fundamental difference between lossy and lossless. And generally speaking, if you want to have lossless, it's something you have to opt into. It's not something that you're just going to get automatically.
Right. Right. All right. Awesome.
All right. So don't confuse Apple Lossless with spatial audio with Dolby Atmos. They just aren't the same thing. One talks about quality, and that's where we're talking about high-res lossless, high-resolution lossless, whereas Dolby Atmos is more about the playback experience. So why don't we just go into these and look at them? So Apple Lossless. What is it? We talked about it just a second ago, and I want you to look at the logo that Apple has on the right-hand side for their high-res lossless. I have no idea if this is the intent, but I want you to see that you basically have a sine wave. You have a waveform. And notice how all three waveforms are identical. And notice what I just talked about a second ago. You have the original music file, the waveform. Then you have the compressed version, which contains all the data. And then when it's uncompressed, you have exactly the same file, bit perfect, as the original. And I have a hunch that that may have something to do with the logo they chose. I have no insider information, but I thought it was very interesting.
Right.
So the difference between lossless and lossy music is stark. It's really the difference between what we would experience visually with standard definition television and what we have now with ultra high def 4K. As we mentioned a second ago, a lossless codec doesn't compress the signal and throw data away like a lossy codec. So what you'll typically see with Apple is Apple has had a codec called AAC. The AAC codec is a lossy codec. It's actually a very good lossy codec. It sounds good. The way that it handles psychoacoustic information is very, very good, but it still throws data away. It is light years better than crappy MP3. MP3 should just never hit our computers ever again, and that's just it.
I
So
mean, in the advent of terabyte hard drives now, do we really need to even have the war? Because I know there's people that say in a blind test, MP3 320K is indistinguishable from a bit for bit perfect FLAC file.
that's
Maybe
a
it is.
bunch of baloney, and I'm
Yeah,
gonna get into that with something
yeah.
that
It
happened.
really, there's a lot of variables there. But why do we still argue about this when it's so cheap to get hard
Yeah.
drive space and just get the freaking file that's perfect?
And I agree with that, and I'm gonna say something else that I think is a nuance. My Apple hat. Well, think different.
Yep.
I firmly believe that the music industry and the streaming providers, Apple chief among them, just have a responsibility to really deliver to the consumer a superior product. Not everyone might be able to tell the difference in every circumstance, but there are individuals, and I think a growing majority of individuals, who absolutely can tell the difference. And we have to look at ourselves as custodians of music more so than something that we're just doing for the background. And I think that's an important point that I hope the industry will start to look at, is there's a notion of responsibility that I feel is important. Because when I listen to music, it impacts me. And wait till I talk about the Bang & Olufsen experience, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So when we talk about lossless codecs, the two chief among them are FLAC, which those of you who may be dealing with Android systems or non-Apple platforms may be very familiar, the free lossless audio codec. And then there's the ALAC, it's the Apple lossless audio codec. And Apple uses the ALAC codec for all of their encoding. So if we look over to the right side, we have a sine wave, an audio wave. And really what's happening with a low resolution file, whether it's a 16-bit, 44 kilohertz CD or what have you, a low resolution file has to take the analog sound and convert it to digital. And when you have a low resolution file, a good analogy that's typically used is using graph bars. And a low resolution file is going to use pretty large graph bars. And you can see it doesn't really fit the sine wave perfectly. There are differences there. Whereas a high res file, while it's still converting from analog to digital or digital to analog, it's going to do it at much finer resolution. And it's going to be so much closer to the original waveform that it's going to be virtually indistinguishable. And that's why high-res audio just sounds better, more natural, more analog, if you will.
Right.
So how do you get Apple Lossless? The great thing is there's no upcharge on this. So if you're an Apple Music subscriber, you just get it. There's no additional cost. The entire catalog is now becoming slowly available, which is 75 million songs in lossless. As I mentioned, Apple's using their proprietary ALAC codec. And in order to get it, you do have to have certain specs. So you have to have your iOS, iPad, or tvOS, which is your Apple TV 4K at version 14.6 or greater. And on the Mac OS side, you have to have 11.4 or greater, which is their new operating system, Big Sur. As I mentioned earlier, too, you have to opt into enabling Apple Lossless. So all you need to do on the Mac side is go to Preferences and Playback, as you see on the graph that I have on the right side, then go into Settings, and then Music and Audio Quality, boom, check Lossless Audio, and then you can determine if you want to stream at lossless high res and even download. And I have a KB, a knowledge base article that Apple has with all the details. So Gene, I'm sure you're going to include that in the notes afterwards so people will be able to click on it. But if you want to refer to that, I have that available to you. Once you're in Apple's Music app, you will actually notice the lossless logo on an album if it has lossless. So it doesn't matter if it's a new recording or something that's 20 or 30 years old. Apple has really done a fabulous job of providing this in lossless format for a huge number of their catalog.
So back up for 1 second. If you're gonna, let's say we don't have a Mac and we're just using an Apple 4K TV.
Yep.
If you set the audio settings in the Apple 4K TV, I think it says Dolby Atmos. I don't know if it says anything about lossless. Is it automatically going to play lossless for files if you have it plugged into a receiver with HDMI?
So we'll go from what we were going to talk about and just bring it up here. The answer is yes, it is available. But the caveat with the Apple TV specifically is it doesn't have the hardware to deliver lossless at full resolution. So when Apple's talking about lossless and some of these companies are talking about lossless, having something at CD quality, 16-bit 44.1 or 16-bit 48 kilohertz, that's what they're also defining as lossless.
Right.
What audiophiles will sometimes think about is, oh, I'm getting a 24-bit 192 kilohertz file, and that's what lossless is. No, that's not what the industry is really doing. You're truly getting an uncompressed master. And if you're wondering, since I mentioned the word master, what does Apple Digital Master mean? It also has something to do with Apple's mastering process and dithering. So if you want to Google that, you can totally geek out. It's not where I want to go down that rabbit hole. But it's really how something is then produced for the platform, because things have to be downsampled. And if they're not downsampled either with a certain ratio or a mathematical formula, it can cause some errors that you can hear. So that's the other thing that you may see, as you see with both Sarah McLachlan and with Rush, is these are not just lossless albums, but they're also Apple Digital Masters.
Right.
So let's go to some playback caveats and maybe some presuppositions. So the actual resolution of the playback of a lossless file really depends on the original mixing. So some studio recordings, even though they say lossless, are really only recorded at CD quality, which is 16-bit at 44.1 kilohertz. So to go a little bit deeper to your question about the Apple TV hardware cannot support anything more than a 16-bit 48 kilohertz file.
Oh, wow, I
And
didn't know that.
that's, yeah, so it's downsampling everything. So I think I saw something in the chat. I've also been hoping that this is going to be the case. Under the heading of what we talked about as custodians, I would love to see Apple deliver an Apple TV product that did have the ability to output full lossless quality up to 24-bit, 192 kilohertz over the HDMI output of the device. So I'd be willing to pay, and I know a lot of enthusiasts who are watching would be willing to pay a little bit of an uptick for that. But that is something that is just kind of a pet peeve for me. The Apple TV sounds really good, but it's not something like a high-end DAC or a high-end network audio player
Wow, and
by
I
our
just bought a
standards and
second.
definitions.
I just bought the latest Apple TV for my theater room system just because I wanted to have a local source in there, and I didn't even look at that spec. So two questions I have for you on that. Is it
Mhm.
possible that there'll be a firmware upgrade, or is it a hardware limitation? And the other question is, what if I played Apple TV on a Roku box does Roku have higher sampling capability than an Apple TV?
So I'll tell you what my understanding is, and I think I'm right because I have researched this for a few years. It is absolutely a hardware limitation on the boxes. If somebody knows something different, but even installing something like Plex or Firecore, basically, going into the Apple TV and undoing the operating system, it's a hardware limitation that you have with the device. If you're playing the Apple Music app on a different set of hardware, then that dynamic changes. So you have the ability to play, for example, higher resolution, a 24-bit 192 kilohertz from Apple Music, but you need to have a DAC like an Oppo 205, like my Cambridge Audio network player, for example. That will absolutely, via the USB port or the Thunderbolt port on the Mac, be able to give you full 24-bit 192 kilohertz if the file is at that resolution.
Hmm.
And the caveat there again is Apple lossless at that bit rate and at that the 24-bit 192 kilohertz. All of this is just limited to 2-channel playback. So you're not getting 24-bit 192 Dolby Atmos, for example. So this is more what I would say is our audiophile 2-channel, and that's why I really wanted from the get-go to make a distinction of these concurrent announcements, because they're different and they matter to us as audio fans, audiophiles, audioholics, and just to be able to pull some of this out, I think is important. So
So
if we
one
look,
thing people want to think about too is if you really are dying to get 192 kilohertz sampling rate, if you're running room correction, whether it's DRAC or most of the room correction systems, they downsample the 48K anyways. DRAC is
that's right.
48K. Yeah. The only one I think that does beyond 48K is Yamaha's YPOW. So I think that's 96 kilohertz, but most of the room corrections are limited to 48K.
And Anthem Arc. And if I remember correctly, Gene, that was a change. We got to double check with Sound United on this. I'm pretty sure the newer versions of Odyssey are no longer limited to 48 kilohertz. So again, this is details, this is nuance, this is geeky, but some of us just want to know. So I
Yeah.
think it's important. So if we look at now, hey, I've got a lossless file. What do I get? Well, if you've got a computer, you've got a device, and you're doing it, you got a Mac device specifically, an Apple OS device, you cannot play high res without downsampling it through AirPlay. AirPlay is going to downsample that file to 16-bit 48 kilohertz no matter what you do. Okay, so if you stream that to an AVR, you want to play something to your Apple headphones or your AirPod Pro, you're dealing with a codec based on AAC, which is a lossy codec. Ironically, if you're an Android user and you have aptX HD, which is a high resolution codec, 24-bit 48 kilohertz, or LDAC, which is Sony's, which has even higher resolution and bit rate potential, then you can actually get better performance theoretically through those devices. The way, if you're really going to geek out, is to do this. So if you go to an Apple store, and I've done this on my setup at home here, is you can take your iPhone, you can get this, which is your USB adapter. They call it the camera kit, or it's a Lightning to USB adapter. Basically, you pop this guy into your iPhone, and then you take a USB A to USB B, and you can plug it into a DAC, and you will get high-res audio directly out. If you want to listen to a headphone, then I would suggest you get one of these two guys here. So what I have is the Helm Audio DAC. So this is a USB-based DAC. So if you have a device that's USB-C based, it plugs right in. Otherwise, they give you an adapter for USB-A. And boom, Apple adapter. And now I can get high-res audio out of this sucker right to a wired headphone. And Estelle & Kern has also come out with one right here. This guy's fabulous, as is the Helm Bolt Audio DAC. So these are some pretty cool devices. The AudioQuest Dragonfly, some of us may be familiar with as well, that you can either plug into your smart device or your computer and use that as a USB DAC to get full bit rate if it's available, the full sampling rate.
Right.
If you're playing out of your Mac and you've got a high-end home theater system, then absolutely just take a USB cable, plug it into your USB DAC, and boom, you can stream and play up to 24-bit 192 kilohertz from your DAC or AVR if it has a built-in DAC. And then finally, as we said, with the Apple TV 4K, everything is 16-bit 48 kilohertz. So you can play lossless, but that's where you're kind of limited to.
And
All this info.
it is important to note that I see people talking in the comments about you can't hear up that high, and that's true. I mean, human hearing limits is when you're young and healthy is 20 kilohertz. When you get to our age, you're lucky if you can hear to 14 or 15 kilohertz, to be honest. So a sampling rate of 44K is still good enough to get the full bandwidth of audio. The fact that it's lossless and you're getting 16, 44, or 48, that's still very high resolution audio.
Mm-hmm.
Should not be a problem.
No, I agree. This is at some point it does become academic, right?
Yeah.
And this is not my area of research or expertise, so I'll leave it to those who are doing that. So I think the audiophile lore that sometimes develops is anything over 24-bit 96 kilohertz, you're going to be lucky if you can tell a difference at all. So
what really matters is when you do the higher sampling rates, is you get better DAC performance in the passband. Because I see a lot of DACs that limit to 48K and they get pretty high distortion right when you get to 20 kilohertz. So that's really
the issue. Is it pushes the noise and distortion
too close
the
to
limits.
the audio band. Yep,
exactly. So again, I think that's a totally separate conversation, but there are some theoretical merits to having the higher sampling rate. And you know what? I don't disagree with the theory on that.
Yep.
So now the question is, can you hear the difference? So I just want to tell you,
speaker.
This is the Biolab Bang & Olufsen Biolab 90. So Gene, I don't know if you remember, but I had received a call from Bang & Olufsen, and Bang & Olufsen wanted me and wants me, I guess that's still in the present, to review the speaker. So the Biolab 90 is a $90,000 speaker, and it is an incredible engineering achievement. There's drivers all around the speaker. It uses DSP and sound field management, and it's just amazing. So they had invited me to their New York office. So I went, and we were talking a little bit about a review piece that I had, and then we sat down um, to listen to the BioLab 90. And I'm excited, I'm pumped about this. And I was going, this sounds awful.
Oh
This
no.
sounds awful. And I'm looking at the room. I'm going, okay, this is a pretty small room. Is there something wrong? But no, the DSP should be correcting this. Long story short, I just politely said, can you please go to the next song and play this? I'm a little bit more familiar with this. And finally, I said, I have a funny feeling we're not playing a high res file and we're playing a lossy encoded stream, because they were playing Deezer for me.
Mm-hmm.
Sure enough, they went into the settings and it was not a lossless stream. It was a lossy stream.
Mm.
So I played tracks that I know well. I immediately noticed the collapse of an image. I noticed instrumentation was smeared. The soundstage had collapsed from what I knew to be a great three-dimensional from the systems that I have at my house and I've listened elsewhere. If somebody tells me you can't hear the difference between a lossy codec and a lossless codec, I was given a totally blind situation. And I'm sure the overwhelming majority of folks who are listening here, if they were put into the same situation, you can absolutely hear the difference. It didn't feel right. And then when
Wow.
you started really thinking through the nuances. So, yeah, I'm in the camp that it matters. I do think that you can hear the difference. And that's why I'm so excited about Apple's really strong stance into lossless audio. So I'll say one other thing. Um, if you are familiar with Real HD audio and Mark Waldrep, Mark has been a huge advocate of immersive audio, multi-channel audio, and he's also done a couple of challenges. Is can you hear the difference between CD quality and high res if it's mastered professionally? So I have a link that's there. I was going to reach out to Mark. I haven't spoken to him in a while about this to see if he would be willing to offer some of the files for download. And I'll give you another anecdotal thing. When he did the first challenge several years ago, I was playing the files upstairs, and I asked my eldest child and my wife, can you hear the difference and which one do you like better? And while it was not a strong preference, they could hear a difference, and two non-audio files were able to accurately pick out the high-res file as opposed to the other file, which I thought was,
Wow.
again, anecdotal and interesting.
Yeah.
Mark has greater data. And I do think that there's a correlation between the better the equipment and the speaker and the system and the ability to hear the difference.
And
So,
your own hearing, as I said,
yeah.
back when I was 20, I could hear the power supplies and TVs. It was at 20 kilohertz from the switchers. I can't hear 20K anymore, sadly. Maybe they'll have a pill sometime in the future, but as I get older, my audio equipment gets better, but my hearing gets worse. So
you know,
I'm compensating.
are you a Van Halen fan by chance?
For sure, yeah.
Okay, so I have to pull out and find the story, and maybe somebody in the chat will know of this. But Eddie Van Halen, even in all the concerts, all the age, could hear the difference in the wood that a guitar was made of.
Oh yeah, I believe
And
that. My brother does that too. He's a jazz guitarist.
it's amazing, right?
Yeah.
And that's what kind of bothers me to a degree, and why I think we as enthusiasts really need to make a push to corporations and to these companies, because you can't just have some of the guys that are in marketing sitting in a room listening to who knows what and say, well, gee, we can't hear the difference. It's there. And you
Yeah.
have professional musicians who can do it. You have audio enthusiasts who can do it. And again, this is about being custodians of what the audio experience is all about. And there's a unique opportunity, especially for a company like Apple, and to take the lead in this. And that's why I think this is, again, just incredibly
They could
important.
be the next Avenger.
There you go. I'll pull out my Captain America shield. Oh,
Right.
wait.
Oh, wait a
Since
minute. Let's get that.
we
Yeah.
got to do the for my birthday,
Happy
this is
50th.
what I got. So I got
Nice.
my my Captain America 50th anniversary issue. So big
Awesome.
shout out to Andy and Rita and Paul and Anastasia. So thank you very much. I absolutely love it. All
Sweet.
right.
And you have a shield. It's not in the background right now, but he's got an authentic Captain America shield.
I do. It's actually it's right here. So if you want, I can grab that, because since I've moved from where we were doing these in my office, I have the shield behind me, but I'm still in the process of moving it around. So the shield's going to be back in the background in a future at some point once we get all
Right.
this done.
Awesome.
So why don't we now move to spatial audio? So we've talked a little bit about lossless. Lossless is so important, and it really sets the foundation for Dolby Atmos. So this is about immersive audio. I'm not the audio historian, so let me preface that. But if we look at the ballpark evolution of playback, we know that we have in 1877 Thomas Edison, and we have the advent of mono. In 1931, with Alan Blumlein, we have the advent of stereo. And ironically, it was Alan's experience sitting in a movie theater where the mono just wasn't doing it for him. And he says, gee, wouldn't it be amazing if the sound could move from left to right? And it was the necessity is the mother of invention that led to the advent of stereo. And then we knew that stereo was great, but there was more to it. So in multi-channel, we have 1940, and ironically, Disney of all
Yeah.
companies, with Fantasia. We have the advent of 3-channel music. And then Henry Jacobs with his work in concerts in 57, and then Dolby in 78 with 5-channel, which most of us have been familiar with growing up. And then there's this explosion in the 2000s where we knew that audio comes from all around us in a spherical experience. So in 2012, the public launch of Dolby Atmos, then Oro 3D in 14, and DTSX in 2015. And over the years, it's just worth a nod of upmixers, binaural, quadraphonic, these other attempts to say there's a way we can get a more realistic experience of audio. So for the majority of us, I think, who have gray hairs or no hairs, whatever it may be, up mixers are what we were probably the most familiar with. This attempt to say, I can take a 2-channel experience and then up mix it to the 5 channels that I have. And they were awful. The examples of jazz hall, stadium, thank God none of the
Yamaha
AVRs have
DSP
that
modes.
crap. Oh,
Yeah. Do you
they
want to know what the
were
best sound
terrible.
you want to know what the best sounding 5-channel up mixer is? Or I should say a 4-channel up mixer?
Tell me.
It's the old Hafler circuit. I did it when I was in high school. You do left minus right to the rears on each side, and you use a little volume potentiometer to lower it down. That gives you a good ambient fill without it being in your face and destroying your center image from your front speakers. That's way better than the ProLogic. ProLogic was terrible at the time. It was okay for movies, but you could not put music through it because it would kill all the highs on the surround speakers and anchor everything to the center. But yeah, there's old-fashioned Hafler circuit that he developed back in the 70s, and then I think they sold that in Fosgate or whatever. I don't even remember the history of that.
You're right. It sound, and I don't know anything about that arena specifically. It sounds to me how Anthem approached their Anthem music, where and that's what I loved in the AVM 20 that I had, is I could put a 2-channel stereo using Anthem music, and what it would do is it would keep the center channel off, but then it would give a very slight ambient bleed into the surround channels. So you still have a very strong center channel image. So the point being is, look at what we're talking about, that this just human desire to experience music with real life. So as good as some of these up mixers were, they just really weren't realistic enough. And that's where I think spatial audio now comes into play. And in my opinion, this is the best thing that's happened to music ever. And the promise of spatial audio is amazing. So when it comes to Apple Music, the topic of tonight's show, you once again need to activate it. You don't just get it. So you have to make sure, again, you have a smart device, whether it's iOS, iPad, tvOS, 14.6 or greater. On a Mac, it's 11.4 Big Sur, and then you have to go in and you have to enable Dolby Atmos. Now, what's interesting is you can either set it to automatic or always on, and you might have some pros and cons depending on what device you're listening to through that. So you might just want to test and see which one you prefer. I also have Apple's KB in there as well, the URL, so you can find out all the details about how to get Dolby Atmos on all the respective devices and the settings. So now I'm going to get a little bit complaining with what Apple's done. And let me explain this. First of all, playback. So we're in a truly mobile society. Headphones are exploding. And front and center for Apple is we're talking about playback through headphones. So the AirPods, the AirPod Max, the Pros, Beats models. And I just want to say, having tested the Dolby Atmos music with headphones, it's not bad. It in no way, shape, or form can beat the experience you get with discrete speakers in a room and in an environment. What Apple is doing, which is really cool, and I don't want to go down this hole too much either, is this notion of dynamic head tracking. So you're going to start to hear this more and more. So if I'm wearing headphones now and I turn my head, the music in the sound stage turns with me. But with dynamic head tracking, just like real speakers, if I turn my head, I'll continue to hear the stereo image or the vocals exactly where they're coming from, just like in a room where I have dedicated speakers. So dynamic head tracking is coming. It's something that promises to be really exciting, especially when it comes to this notion of being able to locate where these audio objects are going to be in a room, especially with movies. So a pretty cool thing that's coming about.
So let me interject real quick about the Atmos over headphones. I when this first came out on Tidal, I got with Matthew Pose and we started listening to all these different tracks, Atmos over headphone. We both came to the same independent conclusion without telling each other. We didn't pre-qualify what we listened. We just kind of wrote each other emails. We both found it to sound phasey. It didn't sound very accurate. We preferred the 2-channel mix. And quite frankly, I am blown away by binaural recordings over headphones.
Yeah.
I want to see more of that. I'd rather see binaural recordings on headphones than maybe the Dolby Atmos mixed headphones the way they're doing it now.
Your experience with You Talk with Matthew is exactly what your conversation was with me and mine back with you. So it's 3 of us now who have mentioned that. It doesn't sound right. And what's problematic for me is the fact that I've listened to Dolby Atmos over headphones with tracks that are mixed for headphones, and it's freaking amazing. I don't have the insider technical information. I haven't been able to sort of do a deeper dive and get those questions answered, but there's something not right here with the headphone playback. So I'm not sure. This is all conjecture. This is just me guessing and blowing smoke. I don't know if this is sort of an automated process in the mixing where, there's the ability to output a Dolby Atmos, and then it's doing it as part of multiple exports that you would get in the software, or if you need to do some specific mixing of the objects just for headphones. Because I've listened to Dolby Atmos, and Gene, I'm going to provide that link that I had sent you by text several weeks ago, and I think it was the Dolby Atmos Amaze or one of those tracks that when you listen to it on headphones, you literally hear the sound behind you, up, and you think it's 20 feet away, and you can actually measure the distance instinctively. So I don't know what's going on, but I don't think that element's been perfected yet. So it's okay, and I think that if you're really a critic of music, you may be disappointed. So just hold your judgment.
Quick shout out. We got Wade Robson, one of our writers, longtime writer. He's been with me almost since I started Audioholics. Wade actually wrote an article about Dolby Atmos over Apple Music and Lossless when the announcement came out. I'm going to link it into this video. He talks
Great.
similar to what you're doing in the slide presentation in the editorial format, is how to take advantage of these services. Great to see you here, Wade, and I want to have him on our YouTube channel in the near future because he's got a lot of interesting stuff to talk about.
Very, very cool. I apologize. It seems like there's a clip here where the image has cut off some of the text, but it's 2018 or later models on all this. But in some ways, I think it's disingenuous to tell somebody that you can listen to Dolby Atmos through a computer speaker.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of crap. Okay. Yeah. Can we just call it that? Yes, you can play an Atmos track, but there's no way you're getting any sense whatsoever through this 15-inch MacBook Pro that I have. I don't know, like that's a little bit of a disappointment to me. Yes, you can play it. Don't judge it. That is not Dolby Atmos. You're better to just stick with plain old stereo. So that's I'm off my soapbox on that one. When it comes to playback on the Apple TV, same thing. It's the wireless headphones that are supported. And this is where, again, it gets into a little bit of a nuance. Apple does say it's a Dolby Atmos compatible surround bar, and those things are hit or miss. I've heard some really good demos, and I've had some really good Atmos sound bars here for review, and I've had some that really suck. So, pardon my French, it's just, I think it's going to be, if you really want the most out of this experience, given what the wow factor is and the ability to have whatever you can do domestically, you really want discrete channels. And that's what's going to give you this really wow, amazing experience. So when it comes to the premium way, the best way, you ideally want to have an AVR. You want to have discrete speakers to get the best possible spatial audio experience that you can. So, Gene, you and I beat the pulp out of spatial audio, Apple's spatial audio with Dolby Atmos. So I think we talked about what it is. I did the AirPods Pro. I've done some other headphone listening, but we really focused our attention on these systems. So this is the setup that you used. You did a 5.2.4 and a 9.3.4. And for those of you, just to refresh your memory, 5 is the first number, is the number of channels that are at ear level on the floor plane. The next number is the number of subwoofers. And then the third number is the number of height channels or in-ceiling speakers. So you had one of the creme de la creme of Paradigm, who makes phenomenal equipment. And you had the Paradigm Premiers. And then you had, as we are both RBH lovers, you had the 9.3.4 with one of the most amazing freaking speakers on the planet with the SVTRS. So you put things there. And then I did it on my end. I had an 11.6.2 here where I am with the RBH SVTR signature, and I've got those mixed with some SVS speakers and the Beale Street Audio in-ceiling, and with my Denon 8500H. And then I did an 11.4.2 with a Revel Ultima 2 Salon anchored system. So I think
your wide channels are in the ceiling, right?
I don't do wide channels. So I think that's a difference between our two setups. I don't do any wide channels at all. I'm basically doing 7 canonical or traditional on the ear level and the floor level.
So where does the 11 come in from that then?
Let's see. Do I just have a typo? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out. I'm like, wait a minute.
Sorry.
That's hilarious.
Well, you know what it is? I'm so used. I guess if I have no excuse, but if I did have an excuse, it would be because I'm always accustomed to doing the Oro stuff in addition to the Atmos. Yeah. Okay.
No, so the reason why I ask is I actually ran wide channels in my theater room as height channels by angling them down, because it's really hard to implement wide channels in a room, because number one, if you you really need a wide room to pull it off. Otherwise, they're going to be too close to the mains, or they're going to block a walkway, or they're going to reflect, from the main speakers to the wides. It's really difficult unless you could do an on wall, or if you have a really wide room. So I tried actually putting height channels in the ceiling and angling them down, putting them wider than the mains, and I like the way it works. When I watch Atmos movies and I watch all the channels activating on my Storm Audio, you can sense the wide speakers kicking in, like during the Unbroken demo, that Atmos demo. I'm sure you've seen that many times. It adds ambience. If you could add wide channels, and if you have to add them to the ceiling, it's better than not having them at all if you have the ability.
Very cool. That I have not done. So I haven't done the wide channels, and I apologize for the typo on that one. So Gene, good catch.
We'll fix this. We're gonna upload this. By the way, this whole slide presentation is going to be on our Patreon channel. If you guys are members, you can follow us at your own leisure after this broadcast is ended.
Great. And you can see what Gene and I did is I used the Oppo and the Cambridge Audio, obviously for the high-res lossless testing through my Anthem and the Revels. So spatial audio, this is a good example if you want to conceptualize, if you're not familiar with it, is there's both an ear level layer and there's also a height level layer. And the intent is sort of to create this spherical envelopment. So the 3D rendering is on the left side, and then on the right side, what you have is sort of looking from the top down, where you're able to see the dotted squares are the in-ceiling speakers and how that canonical layout would typically be in a room. So this is what Gene and I are looking at. With Gene, what he mentioned with the wides, in between the front and the side speakers, there would be two other speakers towards the front, in front of the couch.
Right.
So that's what we're talking about. So impressions, frankly, it's the real deal. And it's amazing. Headphones don't do justice to it. If you can really multi-channel speaker system, I won't say that more, but it's true. But there are some growing pains and glitches. So Gene and I both found several of them that we want to let you know about. And one of the things that was really glaring to the two of us is there aren't mixing standards in place. So different people are doing different things. Some we found worked well, others sounded really bad. And I found among the most criminal, can I say that, is Tom Sawyer, Rush's Tom Sawyer.
Sounds awful.
I wanted to cry.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. I'm going, what the heck was that? Yeah. What an amazing freaking song. And the Atmos version sucks. It's
really
awful.
Bad.
So let me tell you.
I think part of that is I'm a huge prog rock fan, as you guys know. Genesis, yes, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Rush. I love that music, but I have to bash it for a minute because most of it was mastered really poorly. It sounds like shit when you put it on a good high resolution system, with maybe the exception of like Steely Dan, for example. I don't consider that prog rock. I consider that jazz kind of fusion. That stuff sounds great. Yeah. So it translates to multi-channel really well. But you take any Rush album, they almost all sound really compressed, too much treble, grainy. I mean, I prefer the vinyl records of some of those old recordings. They just did not master. They didn't transfer well to digital. So what they did with Rush was criminal. I mean, I can't listen to it. I think you said you liked one of the Styx songs. I tried a couple of Styx songs. I didn't like the way those sounded. They sounded very phasey to me. But then you go and put on Riders on the Storm from Jim Morrison, Riders on the Storm, The Doors. And that was originally done in 4-channel mix back when we had, on vinyl, they had the 4-channel mixes, quad. That sounds freaking amazing. Like the raining coming down on you, just especially in my family room system, which is open to the rest of the house. It's a very open sound field. It felt like we were having a giant rainstorm in my house. And then not only that, but the fidelity of that track, hearing the vocals anchored in the center, the separation of the instruments. Why can't we get that with Rush? Why can't we get that with a lot of the bands, the more modern bands? It's like, some of these recording engineers didn't put the emphasis on the sound quality when they mastered this excellent music. and that's the biggest problem.
I agree. And what you will also find in some tracks is the volume leveling is bad too.
Right.
So you'll be listening to, let's say, several Dolby Atmos tracks. All of a sudden, boom, you're playing this other track, and the volume is significantly louder or even softer than what you were just playing. I was listening late one night upstairs, and all of a sudden, it's like, what the heck are you doing? Like, I didn't touch anything. It's like
Yes.
the commercial, right? The commercials that are blaring. So there are growing pains here with the format.
Well,
What?
two other things. Tidal has a big problem with Atmos, and the fact that when you go from a 2-channel mix to a Atmos mix in Tidal, the audio level drops about 20 dB.
Yep.
So then you got
Yep.
to crank it up 20 dB, and then when you're switching between songs, you hear the screen prompts way louder than the music. And then if you accidentally hit a 2-channel track, you're going to get blown off your couch.
And this is on the Apple TV.
This was on Tidal, but yeah,
The Apple
but
TV app, right? The Tidal
yeah,
Apple TV app. So yeah,
yeah.
there's problems on. I don't know what it is. I don't know enough about how the mixing is done and how the uploading, but this is a problem that seems to be across services. So this is not, I think the point we're trying to both make is this isn't just an Apple problem. So I don't want it to be interpreted as, we're bashing Apple in this. There's something else that's going on here, and
Yeah.
just don't have enough information on what's really going on.
So even the Atmos mixes on Apple TV, not even talking about Tidal, they are definitely lower in volume than the 2-channel equivalent mixes.
Yeah, I think we can talk about that ad nauseum, but I think there's a couple of reasons why that may be, but just be aware of that if it is. So why don't we do this? Let's talk about what really happens in an Atmos mix for those of us who plan on really going down, and what the benefits are. So Alicia Keys, I can't say that I'm a huge Alicia Keys fan, that I have her playing all the time, but
Yeah.
I found some of her songs to be such incredible examples of Atmos done right. So if you're listening to Fallen from songs in A minor in 2-channel, then what you typically have is, if you're sitting there on the couch and you're listening, you have the piano, you have Alicia Keys, you have the chorus, just all there flat in a 2, maybe quasi 3-dimensional stage.
Right.
The moment you put this song in Atmos, it will blow your mind. The piano is coming from the rear left channel, just like you're sitting in a club, where you start to think, it's like, wait a minute, that's the experience of when I'm in a room. I don't have everybody just plastered flat on the wall, but I have the instruments discreetly placed, and that's what's happening here. Alicia Keys, her vocals are front. When the chorus kicks in, it's to your surrounds on the side.
I love that.
It's just incredibly well done. That to me just is like case in point of the experience of Atmos, that speaks to why this is such an incredible move by Apple, and why spatial audio is so important.
So one thing I want to say too is, there are purists that'll say it's not natural to have instruments around the room, because when you go to a concert, everything is front stage. Yeah, I get that argument, but you know what? This is a way to express yourself musically on how you want things to sound. Most concerts I go to that are amplified concerts, they sound horrible. Okay, let's be honest. You go to a great venue. I was just at Ruth Eckerd. I watched King Crimson. The concert, the acoustics there are good, but you're listening to these giant PA systems blasting at 100 dB. That's not the experience I want to recreate in my house.
Right.
It's not.
Right.
I would much rather have something like this when they were on stage and they had 3 different drummers. I don't want to hear that mono. I want to hear the left drummer and the left speaker. I want to hear the right drummer and the right speaker, and then have the vocals centered, and then have some ambient fill. To me, that's a sign of a good multi-channel recording. So you're saying you're getting this basically going from the 2-channel to the Atmos mix for the Alicia Keys.
Absolutely. And what I really got a sense is, I was more in a room, and that I found to be natural. I want to just really emphasize that. I felt as though this is a natural way that I might legitimately experience the music in a club, in a concert hall, an intimate one. And it was just so cool. I mean, it was really fabulous. And I want to again highlight what Alicia Keys and the engineers did with Rock With You. And you have these sounds that when you're listening through two channel, they're basically going back and forth through the left and right speaker. But once you shift this to immersive audio, it is going all the way around your head, around the room, and it's freaking mind blowing. What an incredible experience that is in Dolby Atmos. So, having had the luxury of dealing with the different immersive audio formats, Oro 3D, DTSX, Dolby Atmos, having a lot of the demo material that's been sent to me from the different formats, I'll say this is when the mixing can get done right and the
Yeah.
engineers really have a clear vision of what the best practices are and it's not gimmicky, this is going to be something that is going to it's what the enthusiast and the music lover is going to want in their home. That's the bottom line.
So one artist I was very impressed with on Atmos, and I'm not a big fan of her in as a person. I kind of think she's an annoying kind of teenager, but she just kind of blew up overnight. Was Billie Eilish. Um, Her first album is now available. I think two of them are available now in Atmos, and her first album in Atmos sounds freaking fantastic.
Yeah.
There's a song called Zanny or something like that, and I was listening to it late one night in Atmos, and I'm listening to the bass. It's a distorted bass. It's kind of a because she's talking about taking drugs or whatever. All of a sudden, I hear someone behind me in the room, like someone opened the door and started talking or something. I had no idea that that was in the recording. I just did not expect that. And just the way that they did the mixing for that. So I guess originally it was made for two channel, but then her brother Finesse is this audio tinkerer guy. He's good at mastering music. The guy is really talented. They made an actually really authentic, discreet Atmos mix that made you more involved with what was going on with the lyrics. And I love the fact that while you're listening to it in Atmos on Apple TV, they show you the lyrics. So you go on this journey because maybe you don't always understand what the lyrics are in the song, or you're reading it and then you're hearing all these discrete placements of sound because they do a lot of layering of sound. You can't get that in two channel.
Yeah, I agree. The sound stage, for those of you who enjoy um, a laser focused image, you appreciate a deep sound stage. That's the other thing that Atmos really brings to bear is this just sense of space. When I was listening to Mozart's Requiem, where there's that track is available, that work is available rather in immersive audio. I've heard Mozart's Requiem in the round, and I've heard it live. I've heard several recordings of it, and being able to hear that in Atmos was so powerful. And going back to this theme that I keep talking about, the experience of music is chorus and instruments can become so much more powerful, so much more emotive when it's done right with Atmos that there's just no as a somebody who loves two channel music, I just can't go back to two channel once I've heard it. It is just
Yeah.
such a better experience. So let me just run down a couple of things, Gene, just to let everybody know is Apple has a Dolby Atmos Apple Spatial mix that they've got a ton of music in there. So it starts with Marvin Gaye's From Mono to Stereo,
Yeah.
and it takes you through. It's an outstanding demo. It then goes into The Weeknd's Blinding Lights, exceptionally well mixed, and another really good Atmos demo. Shallow by Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper. Vocals were coming strongly from all the speakers, and
Yeah. I don't
it
like that.
was
Yeah.
this was not so good Atmos. I felt. The other thing that I noticed that I think all enthusiasts need to be aware, and I'm talking about now we've got discrete speakers, is speaker placement and timbre matching is going to now become even more so of an issue because when you're dealing with movies, you have a lot of dialogue through the center channel, and then you have action and things that are coming from all around.
Yep.
When you're talking about music, it's about creating a cohesive envelope. So if you haven't necessarily spent a whole lot of time really playing with your speaker placement, you're going to do yourself so much better by taking the effort to do that, and you'll be rewarded tremendously with Atmos. I mean, Queen's another one bites the dust. Vocals were center spread, and I found that some effects were spanning all the channels. It was effective use, but the instruments and vocals were coming strongly through the center. The glitch that I noticed, and Gene, you noticed this too, is if I'm using an Apple TV and I'm playing through my home stereo system, there is a 3-second delay
Yep.
before the Atmos codec will kick in on the AVR. So we talked about Rush earlier. Like, what an incredible opening that is, right? For Tom Sawyer. You miss the first 3 seconds of the song because it's waiting for things to kick in. So this is an area that I think Apple needs to address, because I'm doing it on an Apple device and feeding it through a premium Denon's flagship AVR, and you experienced it in all your setup. I experienced it in the Anthem. So this is a rampant problem no matter who the manufacturer is, and I'm hoping that that's something that can get fixed.
So the good news about that is if you're on an Atmos album, and it goes from one song to the next, there's no audio dropout. It's only when you switch to something else. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the interface and how it's hard to find Atmos music. Are you covering that in the slide presentation, or?
You know what? I haven't, and we could do a screen share of that. I've got a couple of more slides about the Atmos. Not all immersive is created equal, and then going into a little bit some of the issues. So maybe what I can do is just close these out, and then we can go it.
No, keep going, and I'll get to. Okay. I'll talk about it when we get to that.
So the mixing, as we talked about earlier, is going to be critically important, I think, to the success of this and its widespread adoption. A lot of the 5.1 and multi-channel mixes that were done on Blu-ray, some of them were really gimmicky. And they said, okay, let's have the guitar coming from the rear. Let's have the drums coming from the side. It's really confusing for someone who's been used to listening to music in a home environment to go into that musician perspective. So I think that the audience view, focusing on ambience and really doing an interpretation that supports the music, is going to be critically important. And the gimmicky stuff just needs to go. Like Guns N' Roses, Sweet Child of Mine sucks in immersive audio. Totally gimmicky. So we talked about the 3-second. We also noticed different mixing standards. So sometimes you'd have the vocals coming out of all 3 speakers, the fronts, left, center, right. That was really bad, did not create a strong image. Sometimes we'd have the vocals coming out of left and right, and the center was silent. That was sometimes effective. And then sometimes what I found is the vocals were dominant in the center and then bled into the left and right, but there was no instruments coming out of the center. And it was really odd sometimes. And then I ran into another issue here with the Denon, and I'm willing to bet I probably would have run into it with the Anthem as well. But there were sometimes I'd be playing a Dolby Atmos track and the channels would get messed up. So left and right would now start coming out of right and right side surround. It was freaky. So what I had to do is I had to pause the track. I had to play it again. And I experienced it several times, not super frequently, but I did experience it about 3 or 4 times. So there's something going on here with the ability to be able to lock on to that Atmos signal and decode it.
It's interesting because I had I don't know what's going on here either, but there were several times where I played Atmos over Tidal, and like The Doors, for example, the music was extremely modulated and distorted. Like I had to restart the device. I don't understand what would cause that. It eludes me. But it's not all the time. It's always when you're giving a demo. It's always when you have someone over your house that's never heard your system. Murphy's Law is going to get you.
But it's there. There's some sort of problem that I can only describe it, you can only describe it, where there's a problem locking onto the Atmos signal. And I
Yes,
have had a similar problem with Rune that's totally unrelated, where I have had channels totally messed up, where I've had actually the rears playing, and then I've had to either restart or I've had to have things, resync to get everything working right. So I don't know. Somebody probably knows the answer to that and can enlighten us in the chat room at some point.
yeah.
So the rules of mixing, again, are we mixing for a sense of space and ambience? Classical music, where the hall or venue is part of the experience, can just so richly benefit from Atmos. Um, with Oro 3D, there are just some freaking amazing examples of where this is done right. And then maybe what will also come into play is give the user a choice in an album if the artist wants it. Do I want
Yeah.
to give the individual the audience perspective or the orchestral
That
mix
would be
where I'm
incredible.
sitting, right?
It's like when we had the different viewing angles on Blu-rays, right?
Yes. So I'm okay with that perspective. I just don't think that being in the middle of the orchestra or being in the middle of the band is something that is natural to what we, especially non-musicians, are accustomed to. But I think it's cool if that's an option that you can mix and provide. So that's a recommendation and suggestion I would have, but I wouldn't do that as the default. And then again, I don't want to do the mixing of genres and formats, but if anyone has ever listened to Imagine Dragons, I Bet My Life, and this is a DTS X mix, it is among the best ever examples that I've heard of multi-channel immersive audio. And like I mentioned with Alicia Keys, like some of these other artists that are here, I mean, the Beatles, we've got Nora Jones, all these different things that I took a ton of notes on during my listening session. Is the future of this technology is just bright, and those of us who have dreamed of immersive audio multi-channel, it's here. And
Yeah.
Apple, I think, chief among them, just needs to lead with both the lossless and spatial audio. So now we can go
So
into some of the interface stuff.
so I have some quirks with the interface for Apple Music, and just like I do with Tidal, it's really difficult to find what's in Atmos. I mean, there's a special section that says spatial audio, and then they have different categories. But there's times when I pull up an album, let's say Steven Wilson, and I'll
Hmm.
pull it up and it won't have the Atmos mix. I have to go and search for the Atmos mix.
Yeah.
They should have by default an area that for every album it should default to the highest resolution. So it should default to Atmos, and if your system doesn't detect Atmos, it should go to lossless. And for whatever reason, if you want to downsample that, you can do that as well. I think it's a little discombobulated the way they're doing it right now. It's a bit frustrating. If I want to give a quick demo, if I don't create a playlist, I'm kind of screwed if I'm looking through songs to try
Right.
to find something. So that's one thing. The other thing too is when you're on an album and it shows you the song that you're on, it shows you the artwork for the song. When I hit next to go to the next song, it shows you that artwork for that next song. Why can't I hit the freaking button and start playing that song? Why do I have to back up, back into the album and scroll down to the next song? Why? This is Apple. It's supposed to be easy.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you. That was the very first thing that I had. And Gene, notice this is the same thing with Tidal. When Tidal launched Atmos, it's not as though you could search for whatever it is. They had to create a special playlist just for that. So I'm gonna guess, as somebody who's been part of coding projects before, maybe they didn't think of it. And this is, for whatever reason, maybe a little bit of a heavy lift for them to be able to separate out and provide users the ability to search for either lossless
Yeah.
or Adobe Atmos mix. But yes, we have a request from the Audioholics. We want to be able to search for Atmos mixes, not just be confined to a predefined playlist that we've been given.
Right. Hey, we got a super chat here from On to Red. Good topic. I think Atmos still on beta, but the potential is there. but there are some tracks that sound amazing on Atmos, like Dune, Paul's Dream. I'll check that out. I'd never heard of him. I will tell you this: I put on an Eagles mix in Atmos, and I did not like it. Like, I've got Hell Freezes Over in DTS, which sounds freaking phenomenal, especially it was recorded in the 90s. But I put on like New York Minute or something like that, and I was like, I was very disappointed in the Atmos mix. Some of these mixes I think are just being up mixed from 5.1, and they're not
I
actually,
agree.
yeah, they're not really doing anything special to them.
That was my sense in a couple of these. I mean, you and I talked sidebar on this over the past couple of weeks. It seems to me that some of this stuff, especially things that were mixed in the 80s,
Yeah.
were maybe just auto processed. Or the flip side is maybe they just weren't mastered very well, that lent themselves to being upmixed to Atmos.
And my
So
concern there is I'd rather them not throw everything into Atmos if it doesn't sound good in
yeah,
Atmos and it's not made for it, because then it's going to give people a bad taste and they're going to say Atmos is crap.
I agree. And it's same thing is, what did we say? There's something funky here. It sounds phasey.
Yeah.
And
And
I
then
don't
there's
know that.
sometimes when I hear that, I'm like, maybe I don't have my system calibrated right. It's like, what the heck? But it's like in every system. I've tried it in 2 different systems. Yeah.
No, and I think those of us who have done this and those who are listening, we beat the crap out of this on some pretty high end systems, and we didn't take this assignment lightly to try to look at the merits and the drawbacks of it. It's not perfect,
Yeah, it's
but it's a
not.
step in the right direction.
But you know what I find myself doing now when I go into my theater room, which is finally working, I'm happy to say. It only took me 5 months to get it going. I tend to do most of my music listening now just streaming, just because I don't feel like popping in a Blu-ray or whatever.
Yeah.
I start out in 2-channel for like a half hour. I listen to my 2-channel. I focus. I love that strong phantom center I get out of my main speakers. But it's not within a half hour or so that I say, okay, let me see what I can find on Atmos that sounds good. And then that's the rest of my listening until I shut it
Yeah.
off.
I'm
And I
right
always
there
tell
with you.
people, when you give demos to people, the first thing you want to do is start in 2-channel, then go to multi-channel. Never do multi-channel, then go back to 2-channel, because it sounds dead after that. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
You could start out in 2-channel and it's impressive, but once you have a multi-channel in your head, it's hard to go back.
I agree. I don't know how else to really describe or put some bookends on the conversation here. Um, but I think we've got a couple of different layers. Is number one, Gene, you're talking about again that whole notion of experience.
Yeah.
And what I would love to see happen as a byproduct of Atmos is, I think those of us who have our beloved gray hairs and remember what that vinyl experience was like, going into a music store and you're looking through the records and okay, you're rubbing elbows with somebody. Oh, that's a great album. And I saw them play and whatever. There was this whole social dimension. And then when you brought an album home, you looked at the liner art, there was the artwork on the cover. And I found myself really paying a lot more attention in some ways to the Atmos mix and again that experience of music. And I hope that when we're dealing with headphones, sometimes it's just background music.
Yeah.
And if we are truly I think audio evangelists, it's not just the Apples, the Titles, the Cobuzzes and the streaming services, but I think it's up to all of us, especially with the younger generation, to say, hey, appreciate music. Don't just do it as a background. And there's some incredible things that artists are saying that mean something and matter. We talked about and we bashed a little bit about Rush. Just, listening to a song like Limelight or listening to some of these songs like Time Stand Still and the incredible messages that are there, whether it's peer pressure or aging, music matters, and some of the ideas and thoughts that are being conveyed through the music and the lyrics are timeless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I love all formats, even vinyl. In fact, the funny thing is I don't even have my turntable set up yet, and I'm really missing it, because I do like to sit down sometimes and listen to some of the older jazz records, which sound better in vinyl than
Yeah,
they do on the transfer to CD. But at the end of the day, it's you got to enjoy all the formats. But it's great. We're in a wonderful time right now. The fact that we're getting this high resolution lossless audio for 2-channel, and now we're actually streaming Atmos music. I never thought we'd see the day where we'd be streaming discrete multi-channel music, and it's here. And it happened literally overnight. Like,
I know, right?
yeah,
Who was expecting that? So if we're
not
to
me.
so if we're to really like capstone this, I think a couple of action items that I'd like to say to Apple. Number one, I think, Gene, you and I both agree, we're so excited that you made this step, and you deserve a lot of credit. And those who were behind that decision making, hopefully it was to say we want to raise the bar, not just sort of keep up with the Joneses.
Right.
But I think you have an opportunity to lead. So that's sort of bucket number one. Bucket number two is really think about the hardware. I don't care if you've done 100 listening sessions with Apple internal employees or whatever, but lossless audio really matters. And being able to, you have a unique opportunity to leverage the Apple TV, upgrade the hardware, give us higher resolution output on that device so that it can really become more of a network media player that is up to higher standards. I think some of us would clearly be willing to pay an upcharge for that. So there's got to be economies that are there. And then the third thing that I would say is custodians. You have a unique opportunity, and with some of the marketing material that we got from Apple PR and what we've seen, it does indeed seem as though Apple has taken a curation approach to working with some artists and mixing engineers about the potential of the future of Atmos music. And that's something where there needs to be, I think, an industry-wide investment. Come up with some best practices, what works, what doesn't, and let's not please butcher some great 2-channel stuff. If it's great in 2-channel, let's not make it worse in multi-channel, because that's just going to turn people off to the format and say, oh, Atmos sucks because of, you know, XYZ.
So for those that are not Apple Music subscribers, is it just one flat fee? Was it $20 a month, $10 a month, and that includes everything, including spatial audio as well as lossless, right?
So there's no upcharge to it, and that's another, I think, great kudos. So it's $9.99 a month, and that's what I pay. You can pay another, is it $4.99 a month, or like $15 for family, so you can have up to 6 accounts sharing that. So it's reasonable. Those of us who are willing to pay, you know, an album a month, so to speak, and we're used to paying for streaming, there's no premium for getting all that.
When was the last time you bought a CD?
Well, it's been a long time, and I just don't want to confess that, yes, I bought one more recently than I'd care to admit.
Wow.
So,
I mean, most cars don't even have CD players anymore.
No. And for me, what do? I rip it. And I put it on my Rune server. And that's really the way that I do it, because God forbid you have a power outage. And, you know, even if it's a slow internet day, sometimes that stuff gets throttled. And, you know, if it's stuff I really enjoy and I care about, music matters, then yeah, I'll buy it. I'll, you know, typically try to even buy it in high res or lossless from a store for the stuff that really matters to me.
Right. I got you. Well, Teo, I really appreciate you putting this slide presentation together and doing all the groundwork on Atmos with me. I always like to have confirmation bias that we both came to the same conclusions. It's awesome. I mean, obviously it's not perfect, but it's one huge step for mankind in terms of audiophiles.
I agree. It's the Kobayashi Maru, Gene.
It really is. Awesome. And guys, if any of you guys are regular viewers of our channel and you've not at least seen Star Trek 2, as soon as when you're done watching this video, please go watch it, because that movie teaches so many life lessons. And it's kind of a code of honor of how I live my life. So you'll get a lot of references better of what we're talking about if you've seen at least Star Trek 2.
If only they could be flies on the wall of some of our conversations
Oh
when
yeah.
it comes to Star Trek. So when are we going to do our geek out? So we can talk about Loki, we can talk about Star Trek, we can talk about things that matter from a content point of view. We've got to do that.
Whenever you're ready, man, we'll get Don on here. We'll get, whoever wants to be involved from our staff, because I think having Wade on here would be great, because he's done some incredible editorials on just the trends that's going on, that's kind of ruining some of our hero shows.
Yeah.
I was so glad with the Mandalorian that they redeemed Luke, because milking cows in that movie that was traumatic to me. Luke was my hero growing up as a kid. To see him milking a cow and giving up on life was like, that was ridiculous.
I don't think it was an appropriate. There is no episode 8. It doesn't exist.
Yes.
And I just think it was a complete travesty of how Luke was handled. I just don't think it's genuine.
Well, that's J.J. Abrams. J.J. Abrams takes franchises that have established canon, and he ruins it, and he regurgitates, and he tries to redo stuff that's already been done well. And that's an unfortunate thing, that he got the keys to Star Trek and Star Wars. But I digress. We could do a whole nother video on that.
Oh, wait, that was Rian Johnson. Now, I don't know Rian Johnson, so I forgive me if he's listening or somebody sends this to him, but I just have to make this analogy. He was interviewed about his affinity for Star Wars, and he said he got the Millennium Falcon and he threw it because he thought it could fly, and he smashed it. And I'm going, what a freaking apt analogy for episode 8. So I will stop there. I'm foreshadowing.
Yeah. Well, guys, I think we are wrapped up. We're over an hour and 30 minutes on this. I'm going to try to chop this off into smaller video segments for people that don't have the time to watch all of this. I appreciate you, everything you do for us, Teo. It's always awesome to have you here on these live streams. Guys, don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. We really appreciate your support. You get access to us if you want to answer questions, or if you want to suggest video topics. Make sure you thumb this up, hit the like button, and until next time.
Before we go, very important. I forgot one item that we talked about. What? You cannot get Dolby Atmos out of your Mac over HDMI. You cannot get Dolby Atmos out of your iOS device using a Lightning to HDMI connector. It is not possible. What you will get is you will get an LPCM multi-channel signal that only outputs left and right stereo. So we don't have an answer from Apple as to if that's going to be possible in the future, but that, before we close, somebody's going to try to do that and say, I wish they had talked about it.
The other thing we should probably mention too, if you want to get Atmos music over Apple TV or over Tidal, you could only do it on an Apple TV. You could only do it on a Fire TV or an NVIDIA Shield. As far as I know, those are the only 3 streaming devices right now, as of us doing these videos, that will support streaming Atmos music on those 2 platforms.
Agreed. Thanks to all the fans. Love the comments. And Gene, kudos to you, man. You really just rock.
Thank you. Likewise, man. I appreciate it. Appreciate all the love we're getting on our channel. And with that said, until next time, my friends, keep listening.